You are welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this panel discussion. It's a great pleasure to have you on board. My name is Prince Ijeoma, the co-moderator of this panel discussion. This event is being hosted by Richflood International Limited. Richflood is a leading continental provider of environmental and social due diligence services for investment in Africa. The firm works closely with investors and leaders in the public and private sector of different economies in Africa to provide of kingdom with operational partnerships, namely South Congo and Rwanda, headquarters in Abuja, Nigeria, burning global environmental challenges. The firm The matter of today's panel discussion is Mrs. Adeola Adewale, science in environmental impact assessment and specializes in environmental control.
She facilitates relations between private and public sector organizations and prepares sustainable development business plans. She has planned, designed, and executed environmental impact assessments for field development projects in the oil and gas, manufacturing, and mining sector. She is also presently working with UNDP and GEF on mainstreaming gender issues in the Niger Delta Biodiversity Project, focusing on women issues. Prof is the founder and national president of International Association for Impact Assessment Nigeria Affiliate, now known as Niger Delta Center for Impact Assessment and Community Development, and it was founded in 1998. You are welcome, ma. Also, we have another member of the panelists, Dr. Isin Guzo, who is one of the foremost environmental microbiologists in Nigeria. He has championed dozens of environmental impact assessment studies and environmental audits for oil companies, telecommunication companies, agro-based industries, construction companies, and energy solution companies. He has worked in many public offices, including as head of Pollution Prevention Department in the year 1988 and as a representative of Shell on National Assembly Environmental Manners of Oil Spillage in the Niger Delta. He is also a training facilitator, and as such, He has lectured in many national and international conferences. He is presently the MD CEO of .coin Nigeria Limited. You're welcome, sir. Now, before I hand over to the panelists who will take us through the discussion, I would like to give a general introduction of today's event. For more than a decade, African countries have been enjoying high levels of economic growth, human development, and political stability. And as they continue along the path of economic progress, it is imperative that they find ways to diversify their economies by strengthening non-traditional sectors, expanding their range of products and exports, and engaging with new economic and development partners. Diversification does not occur in a vacuum. It is important we note that. And as identified by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, there needs to be an enabling environment to make diversification possible. For instance, in the trade and industrial policies, a dynamic growth performance, macroeconomic stability, a competitive exchange rate, and expansionary and responsible fiscal policy, as well as institutional variables such as good governance and absence of conflict. And these infrastructural developments will surely have impact on the environment, thus the need for impact assessment. And this particular event is organized by Richflood with the following objectives in mind. First, to discuss the role of environmental assessment as a catalyst or as a panacea for boosting investment projects, financing opportunities in Africa. Secondly, to describe how impact assessments can be a useful tool in creating an enabling environment for economic recovery and diversification. Thirdly, to explore how private sector can diversify their economies and examine some of the major determinants of diversification. And finally, to discuss the critical role of impact assessment in boosting diversified investment project financing in Africa, leading to African economic recovery. In general, we will be looking at some key issues on the objectives of today's event. But before I start asking our panelists the questions we have here, I would like everyone to take the poll that is being displayed on their screen right now. The essence is to collate the opinion of individuals on today's subject of discussion. I would like to start and go straight to the questions that we have for our panelists. And I will direct the first question that I have here to Professor Emehi, after which Dr. Isin Guzo would also make his contribution. Prof. Ma, as a practitioner in the field of impact assessment, and from your experience of developing mitigation measures for identified environmental and social impacts associated with investment projects, can you share with us what diversification strategies investors should be looking at in Africa towards economic recovery? I mean, how do we build back? Over to you, Ma.
Thank you, Adiola. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that it's afternoon or morning everywhere. You are welcome to this program. The first question about the measures you can take regarding impact assessment and diversification are that there's no development that can be achieved without an impact assessment. An impact assessment is a sustainable tool which helps to take care of the environment and the social, economic issues of any development. Without actually doing that, without taking into consideration the environment and the people in that environment, any development, any diversification would put us where we are now, where the climate change issues, degradation of the environment, and economic issues. The recovery phase can help build prosperity and resilience by contributing to long-term and potential sustainability of a country's developmental path. There are encouraging signs, and these signs are that some countries are now going green. Some of the issues about diversification we have in Africa are issues of energy infrastructure to drive any economic development. And one of the issues, one of the paths to take is green economy, which means using natural energies like solar energy, wind energy. And I think this takes care of the climate change issue and also takes care of development. Over to you, Adiola.
Okay, thank you very much, Ma, for that contribution. Also, I would like to hear from Dr. Isin Guzo on this particular question. You know, can you share with us what diversification strategies investors should be looking at in Africa towards economic recovery, and how do we build back better? Over to you, Dr. Sir.
Okay, thank you, Adiola, and thank you, everybody listening. First, I want to thank Richflood for this program. I believe that at the end of it, we'll all be better off listening and then taking away some few things. First, let me just step back and say that impact assessment assumes that something has happened. And so before something happens, there is a normal status. And that's where we're coming from. So we have a line, which is the normal status. And then actually something happens, you now want to see the impact thing on what was normal. So I guess this time around, we are looking at economies globally, and then looking at something that has happened. Obviously, the COVID event and all the things that have happened have put the what is perceived to be normal into a situation where we need a rethink. And strategy is going to be, how do we get aware and even do better? We need a lot of strategies. I want to take an example. I know today that that has led to a lot of impacts. A lot of people.
Okay, good one there. Dr. Isin Guzo, I think his network had a glitch. However, before he went off, he was able to make one very important point about the essence of impact assessment, which has to do with first identifying the normal status of the environment before introducing some changes, and then which is actually basically the essence of impact assessment. While he joins us, if there are other participants in our midst today and has contributions about the particular question we are discussing right now, you can make use of the chat box and then put in your question, indicate your name, and let us know the company or organization or the country you are sending your question in from or contribution. So quickly we'll go to the second question. And the second question goes thus. Beyond the global financial and economic crisis, even before the COVID-19 pandemic came into place, businesses has been facing series of crises, such as the financial crisis, the economic crisis, and COVID-19 pandemic in particular has now exposed the weaknesses of a number of African economies. For instance, the lack of access to finance, the weak productive capacities, and some other impediments to competitiveness. So I'm going to ask, Ma, how do we overcome the significant barriers that exist, which may make it difficult for African firms or investors to compete against their peers in other parts of the world? Over to you, Ma, Professor Emeyi. Okay, seems we have a network challenge. Dr. Isin Guzo,
Yes,
if you are there with me, question.
Yes.
I said earlier that a lot of crises has been affecting business growth over the years. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic now came and exposed all the weaknesses entirely, especially in African countries. Now, how do we overcome the significant barriers that exist, which may make it difficult for African firms or investors to compete against their peers in other parts of the world? Over to you, sir.
Okay, let me quickly say that before the COVID, most African countries about 10 years ago joined in the project called Vision 2020. And it had a lot of MDG projects and things planned to ensure that by the year 2020, both the socioeconomic and financial status of most countries are at where they should be. Unfortunately, those plans were supposed to be worked on by both the politicians and the administrative arms of the governments of different African states. And part of what happened in sectors like education, agriculture, there were so many projects that were generated with specific plan on how to move on a stepwise direction that by 2020 we would have had potable water, would have had basic foods to sustain our populations, reduce poverty, we would have had medical facilities, and then we would have had infrastructure, bank facilities that will keep us moving. But these things did not happen. And then the COVID came in to bring up these issues. We found out that even monies voted on such projects, have been embezzled. And in other words, there is no way we can arrive at Vision 2020. However, now the question is, having seen what COVID has exposed, how do we re-strategize? Now, my view is this: there are some companies that were very strong before COVID, and there were some middle companies that were trying to stabilize. And there were also the small companies that were springing up. Now, everything came to a halt because of COVID-19 and lockdown. So now that we need a recovery process, a restoration process, we have to have a system whereby there will be a mind shift from the original norm. In other words, we look into that have the potential to move quicker into the future. Let's assume that there are some big agricultural projects, companies. These companies may need bank facilities. Now, the bank will make provisions, some level of amount of that will help them to employ people that have not been with business, with employment for this short period. So what am I saying? These other big companies should encourage subsidiary industries like marketing, agricultural implements, and then also power, because power is also another sector that affects every other way. Again, transportation. And also we talk about education. Now, education, we have to have a mind shift. Instead of the classroom teaching process that we have come to a stage where we have to learn to live on electronics, use of computer, use of phones, just like we are doing. Our educational system has to move forward to catch up with the real reality, which will become the norm. Let me stop here first and allow contribute.
Thank you very much, sir. That's a very good one. Encouraging subsidiary companies would help them to build back and then re-strategize. Professor Emehi, if you have contribution on this particular question, I will hand over to you now, ma. Over to you, Professor Emehi.
Thank you. I would like to add to what Dr. Isin Guzo has said. There are 3 points I would like to make, which someone has already alluded to. One of them is rethinking the economic policies concerning small and medium enterprises. These small and medium enterprises are the ones running the economy right now, but we know little or nothing about them. For example, we've talked about, you've asked about how they can access finance and also be able to compete. I think for example, in Nigeria, we have no, I don't know, I'm not an economist, but I think we have no formal policies concerning these small and medium scale enterprises. For example, in agriculture, the value chain, talking about processing of agricultural products, there is a new, some people are trying to do that, but they are in the small and medium scales enterprises. They have no way of getting loans from the banks or improving their industry. We know of the weather in Nigeria and in Africa, and we know of the energy issues. We can't freeze them, we can't actually do anything about our agricultural products before they get to waste. So I'm thinking that for us to re-strategize, we have to rethink the economic policies concerning these small and medium scale. And then, how do we increase productivity? Because we haven't increased our productivity. Therefore, of the informal sector, but they are doing a lot to drive the economic diversification. We need to look at that. And then regional and state economies or provinces or whatever, we need to look inwards to make sure that these also have proper economic policies concerning our medium and large scale before we go on. The big ones are there and they are coming. The same issues concerning energy, concerning infrastructure, they also have to deal with. So what I'm thinking is that if we go back to the drawing table and make sure that our policy, economic policies, right from the small to the large, are well articulated and well drawn out, I'm sure our diversification will take some root and proper tangent. Thank you, Adiola. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ma. I appreciate your contribution. And while you were making your contribution, we received a comment from one of the participants. From the participants list, I can see is Dominic from Rwanda. He says, my contribution is what I think we need to do is first grow our local capacity by boosting manufacturing capabilities. We grow the technology, develop entrepreneurship, invest in research and development. Then we create firm regulations and policy, which I think are very good, very strong points coming from there. And then also similarly said, then we ask African countries to remove trade barriers from the continent in fulfillment of the African Continental Free Trade Fair Area Agreement, that's the AfCFTA agreement, and also to implement the African Economic Partnership Agreement. That's a very wonderful one. Thank you for that good contribution from Rwanda. Quickly, we'll go to, if there are other contributions, we can post it on our chat box as well, and then include the country that we are making the contribution from, so that we read it out and we all benefit from it. Thank you. Now we'll go to the third question. Dr. Isin Guzo, given the small size of African economies and the benefits of economies of scale from regional initiatives, can you enlighten us on ways by which private sector can play a key role by being at the forefront of innovation, research, and development, as well as production? I will take that again for proper understanding. Given the small size of African economies and the benefits that are attributed to the economies of scale from regional initiatives, can you please enlighten us on different ways by which private sectors can play key roles by being at the forefront of innovation, research, development, and production? Over to you, Dr. Isin Guzo.
Okay, thank you, Adiola. This question is very pertinent at this particular point in. I am not going to focus on the impact of COVID on the project, but I want to talk specifically on the project. And I want to look at the oil that I'm very conversant with. We know in Nigeria that, or in most African countries, that energy has been a problem. And like I said at the beginning, we had what we used to call Vision 2020, which I believe most other African countries have their own versions of that. There was a time when in Nigeria, for instance, crude oil was the main source of economic development in Nigeria. So if oil industries are established, they quickly grow, they quickly become productive, and they quickly expand. After a while, we found out that the oil was not, we had more gas than oil, and then they attention to gas. And then Nigeria, for instance, had a project that had to go through the West African pathway, which they call the West African Gas Company Agreement. Now, this was in line with developing the inter-country businesses, such that if you have, for instance, a pipeline for gas running across the West Africa, you can encourage development of other African countries in the business. So the diversification went from crude oil to gas, and currently, as it is now, we see that there is still LNG, which is still gas, but natural gas. Now, natural gas is the in thing because it is environmentally sustainable. It does not pollute the environment as crude oil or even gas. So this initiative of moving into cleaner energy sources and energy sources that are more productive. For instance, what a 1 ton of crude oil can produce, energy that 1 ton of crude oil can produce, you could have just like maybe 20% of the LNG produce exactly that 100% of crude oil. So there is maximization and there is profitability. So if for us to move in this area, we need to focus on projects that are both environmentally and economically viable. Then the other way is that some of the oil industries in this area have to sponsor. They have to allow chairs, what I call power economic chairs, some of the universities, people who will be given the opportunity to do more studies and research in our energy problems and suggest solutions. And these studies must be made available to the companies that sponsor them so that they can implement whatever research findings they have come up with and then hand them over to the politicians and to the government to implement. This is the way we can move faster, and this is the way other nations have moved. Right now in Europe and even in America, they are talking about more environmentally friendly energy sources like wind energy and so on. So these are the things that can be done for us to be able to get to where we're expected to get. I want to reiterate that all these plans were there to ensure that by 2020, we are in the infrastructural reliefs. But sad to note that in 2020, we are still battling with the issues of primary health care, sustainable food production, and so on. So I want to stop there and give Prof. a chance to contribute because I know she's loaded in this area.
Thank you very much, sir. You know, it is actually very important to focus on projects that are economically viable and not just focus on it as a country, but encourage other countries to be a part of the initiative. Thank you once again, sir. I'll hand over to Professor Emehi now as well, who will also make a contribution on the question. Over to you, ma.
Thank you, Adiola. Private sector key role in building and diversifying economies is to fund research, innovation, and production. By having a very strong R&D department that can use the numerous universities we have to come up with new products and improve old products. Just like Dr. Isin Guzo has mentioned, I know that Shell and other oil companies in different parts of the world have been investing in alternate energy, for example. And these alternate energies are the solar, wind, battery, because solar has to be stored in batteries, and so on. California, for example, California is one of the richest states. And I think I've heard that it is even more economically viable than the whole of the US. Why? This is because they have created their development and economy on research and development and production. That is where you have all these things we are using, internet and so on. That's where they all come from. And we cannot, in Africa, we cannot move forward without proper and well-funded research and development departments. The private sector and the universities must come together to work on producing viable and pertinent to the continent. We are talking about Africa. We are talking about Nigeria. What are the issues? The issues are that we keep looking out of Africa. We keep looking to Europe. We are now looking to China to collect money, not to get their technology, not to research into how they have become where they are, but to either take loans from them and squander it, or just copy. If we can copy effectively, that would be a good way too. The funding of research is not cheap. The only body, as taking Nigeria as an example, the only body funding research right now is the federal government or governments. But the issue is that the funding is not enough to come up with, for example, the labs we have. Go to the engineering lab, go to the agric lab, go to all kinds of university laboratories. We don't have what it takes to really undertake research that will produce results that can be invested in. So my key contribution here is that research and development cannot be overlooked, as we have been doing in this new diversification. The old companies, the new companies, the federal governments, the provinces, the state governments have to really start thinking seriously about research. The ASU, for example, that's where I'm coming from. ASU is on strike. And everybody seems to be talking about ASU as if, that is in Nigeria, sorry, as if they are looking for money for their private pockets. The issue that has always, one of the issues, the recurring issue is research and development. Yes, most of us have become professors, but out of our sweat and ingenuity, we have the brains, but we don't have what it takes to come up with research, innovation, and development. We have the human resources, but we don't have the infrastructure. In my university, you're only given light in 8 hours of work, 2 hours in 8 that you are at work. As university professors and researchers, you are supposed to almost sleep in the lab. But where you have 2 hours of light, you can't do anything. It may not be only in Nigeria. We are talking about Africa. I will stop by saying, let us really look at that. If we really want diversification and progress and development, we need to do proper research and development. Thank you. Over to you, Adiola.
Thank you very much. That was really wonderful. You know, the main focus is that companies should not be limited to production alone. Rather, they should also be thinking about research and development. That's a very good one. Thank you very much, Ma. And during the course of the discussion, we received another comment from one of the participants, SCN from Ghana. He says, nice discussion so far. In my own opinion, I believe funding, sponsoring research on innovation and development. I think he's trying to say that we should focus on funding and sponsoring of research on innovation and development. He goes further by saying, establishing and maintaining a vibrant national research infrastructure is a complex and costly is complex and costly, especially for the developing country that can encounter more financial and structural constraints. There is thus the need for the private sector in funding and sponsoring research on innovation and development with greater emphasis on knowledge-based development as opposed to the traditional preoccupation. Thank you very much, SN from Gold Coast of Ghana. Thanks for your contribution. Also, we have another comment on that. Very good from Dr. Ogaji in Nigeria. Very good presentation, Professor Emehi. The research and development is a critical factor for Africa to take its place in the world economies. And thanks, Dr. Isin Guzo, for the example using the oil and gas sector. You know, we are receiving a lot of comments and it's getting more interactive. Now we go to the fourth question that I have here on my list. While building blocks for the implementation of economic recovery and growth plan, what are the factors that can influence the process? You see, while we are trying to build back better and trying to diversify to ensure that we have the economic being recovered, what are the factors that can influence the process of this building block? Dr. Isin Guzo, over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Shadila, once again. Yes, one of the important factors is that there must be willingness. Willingness politically, willingness scientifically, willingness economically. For instance, if we want to build back, the banks must position themselves to be able to be of assistance. The scientists, just like we've said, in the university, must have focused research and development that they can carry out that will be result-oriented. For instance, if you want to improve agricultural produce, in the university, for instance, there should be research on testing of productivity so that we will have improved seeds, have improved grain seeds that can yield more corn, more wheat, more, you know, so those research need to be done in the university. Once the researches are done and those seeds are found, they should be pushed back the economy so to the industry so that they can now plant them and then improve yield as well as the economy. Now, that's one aspect. So there must be willingness of the government to set the policies, the willingness of the industry to implement the results, willingness of in the universities to carry out the research. So my first factor is both political and economic willingness. Then secondly, there must be an intellectual property, this time not theft, but development. What do I mean by that? There are so many small-scale businesses like that are already doing well. Small businesses need to be scaled up. They need to have facilities. So regionally should identify such projects and then pump in the money rather than spend a lot of money on tourism, which is people going for enjoyment, and all. They should spend money on things that can be productive for the country, produce more food, produce more, to earn more revenue, increase in studies about clean energy, which one is better. For instance, let's talk about clean energy. In Nigeria, clean energy, if you look at solar and wind, in the north, you cannot put a wind plant, energy plant. The wind energy plant is more situated in where you have the oceans in the west. And then you have the solar energy power plants should be in the north. So this sort of diversification and focus on different geographical areas with different advantages, because this is based on the fact that in the north you have more sunshine day than in the south, and in the south you have the coastal areas where you have wind. So these are the areas we should begin to look at. But like I said, the research has to be first, there has to be willingness, and government itself has to position itself with politicians that have clear minds. One of the problems we have in administration in Nigeria and in most West African countries is that we keep having round pegs, round in square holes. You go and commissioner for agriculture, read electrical engineering in university. What is he going to do in the field of agriculture? You go and appoint a health minister who read economics in one university or history in one. we need to change these ideas, this paradigm shift, because people are just focusing on how much is there for me, who my person will be there, and all that. Nepotism, favoritism, and all those things are killing our governments. And so there are no clear-cut policies to move the nations. This happens everywhere in Africa, not just in West Africa. So I just want to mention those things and hope that, like I said, the factors are willingness, which must be both political, it must be both economic, and it must also be determined. So the universities must be determined to be productive. There are stories that you give universities money, they don't carry out the research, or they don't give back results. We need to check the processes. We need to put procedures in place to make sure companies that are sponsoring researches are getting their research results so that they can develop and implement them to practicalize and increase not just productivity, but also revenue for the country. Time has come when we cannot be depending on just the oil that runs naturally from the ground. We need to do things, use China using its, Japan is using its brain. They don't have the natural resources that we have. Nigeria and African countries and West African countries, what we need to move this nation forward is to use our brains. I would like to stop there and give Prof a chance to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Prof, we would like to hear from you now.
Well, what are the factors that can influence the process? That is the ECP, that is strategies, and somewhat made it different from all the other plans, needs, and so on that we had before. But there was hope for re-energized development. It is now the 4th year or 5th year, and most of its implementation targets have been missed. Nigerians are, however, still eager to see it deliver on its promises rather than tail towards the direction of the previous plans. We've had very many. So I would like to say that, just as Dr. Isin Guzo has said, good governance is needed to create an enabling environment for investment and trade, to manage natural resources, and to set policies to develop strategic sectors. And the sectors that I will be looking at, which are part of the building block of the economic plan, is agriculture, value addition chain industries, small and medium enterprises. How do we add value to the agricultural products that we get each season, each harvest season, yams, tomato, and all that? How do we add value? This is where research and development. As I said, I'm from that sector, and that sector have tried with the little they have to come up with this value chain addition. More is needed. Research that is meaningful cannot be cheap, and it's never cheap. Then you have industry and manufacturing, enabling environment. The most difficult that Nigeria, for example, have been grappling with is energy. We are talking about West African pipeline. Why we have no energy within Nigeria? I know that when the Kenji Dam was established so many years ago, 1980s or 70s,
Sorry, ma'am.
we were aware that energy was being given to the West African countries 24 hours, while Nigeria itself that produces that energy never had 1 hour a day. It is time to focus on Nigeria. If we have gas, if we want to sell it out, have we done the homework as to how can that gas fuel the energy needed for industry and manufacturing? Retail and tourism. We have a lot of natural resources, e.g. wildlife, resorts. Since Europe and America closed, yes, we also, our borders and interstate borders have been closed, but they have opened. We have a lot of endemic species, the gorilla, the forest elephants, the scattergirons. All these are in Nigeria. We need in Akwa Ibom, in Cross River, in rivers, in Lagos, game reserves, which are now being portioned out to politicians. We need to restructure them. We need to come back to how do we really come up with issues that can affect Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the Guinean forests of West Africa. That means that it has amazing biodiversity and unique habitats, supporting impressive levels of species richness and endemism. That means they can only be found in Nigeria. They can't be found anywhere else in the world. For example, in Bayelsa State, there is a monk, the red Columbus monkey. It's nowhere. It can't be found anywhere else in the whole world. We should begin to develop tourism, not only for people to come in, but for Nigeria. Nigeria spends a lot, billions in traveling abroad. And most of the time is to go and shop. We need to encourage our schools. These are the policies I was talking about. Policies of protecting our environment, protecting what we have. And last but not the least is construction and real estate. This is booming. Everywhere you have people building and building and building. But the problem comes, there's no energy to power these houses, no energy to do any proper work in most of the government places. I know for example, that sometimes when I went to Bayelsa once, the building, the whole civil service had no light for 8 hours. I don't understand. That means no computers are powered, no research is going on. There should be researchers in government secretariats. What are the civil servants doing? Nothing all day, gossiping and selling wrapper and granules. We need to have energy. Dr. Isin Guzo, if you know of anyone who wants to invest, share. We need energy in Nigeria. That is the only thing that can empower our people to improve and diversify. We have the brains, as I said earlier, but we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the enabling environment. Our government has failed. We hope that in restructuring, they will begin to look at what do we do to the country. We are selling ourselves. Lastly, we are selling ourselves to China. China does not have your good at heart. There are countries where they have taken over the government. As brilliant as Nigerians are all over the world, are we allowing other people to come and take over, colonize us again, and we become servants in our own land? Thank you very much. Adiola, over to you.
Thank you, Ma.
We can't hear you, Adiola.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that contribution. We appreciate you. During the course of the presentation as well, we got another comment from, he says, I'm Stephen from Nigeria. Very informative discussion going on here. My contribution based on the factors that can influence the building block process are weighing economic and demographic research from data from research analysis and forecasting. He listed out about 5 of them and said, thank you so much, Richflood, for this great event. And our time is fast spent. So if there are questions, you can just forward them to our website and then to our email address, and we will respond to them. We are sorry, we won't be able to take all the questions that we have because of our time. And then you can email all questions to learning@richflood.com. And then, oh, we have another comment also from Rwanda. Okay, so many comments. We have another panel discussion that will be held next month. You know, in conclusion, I'll just say economic diversification is inextricably linked with economic development and poverty reduction. And success will be crucial for many developing countries as they seek to increase the number and quality of jobs in the face of a rapidly rising and youthful working population. So on this note, I will say thank you very much, Professor Emehi. We appreciate you for coming. And then Dr. Isin Guzo, we thank you for a very good one. We have gained a lot. It has been quite impactful and highly informative. We hope that next time we can have this kind of discussion again. And to all our participants, we say thank you very much for joining, and we say goodbye. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Who is writing Dominic again?